Ever feel like your paycheck just vanishes the second it hits your account? Yeah, you are definitely not alone. So today, we're going to dig into a really simple but powerful tool that's designed to fix that, the 50-30-20 rule. Let's see how this one guideline could totally change the way you manage your money.
But before we get to the solution, it's worth remembering this is not a new problem. Over 250 years ago, Benjamin Franklin warned that a small leak will sink a great ship. What he was getting at is how all those tiny, unnoticed expenses, the ones you barely think about, can completely wreck your financial stability. And wow, is that more relevant than ever today?
And that problem? It is very, very real. For so many of us, there's this constant feeling of financial insecurity, right? A sense that no matter how hard you work, getting ahead just feels impossible. To really get a handle on the scale of this, just look at this number, 40%. What do you think that represents? It's a pretty sobering figure that points to a huge vulnerability in our financial lives.
Well, what it means is that nearly 4 out of every 10 Americans would have to borrow money to cover a surprise $400 expense. Think about that. That single statistic just shows how financially fragile so many households are, basically living on a knife's edge where one small emergency can throw everything completely off balance.
So, faced with a reality like that, how do you even start to take back control? Well, that is where this really elegant solution comes in. It's a budgeting method that was popularized by Senator Elizabeth Warren, and it's all about powerful simplicity. And the rule itself? It's incredibly easy to get your head around. You just take your after-tax income, so the money that actually lands in your bank account, and you split it into 3 simple buckets. 50% for your absolute needs, 30% for your wants, and a super important 20% for savings.
But the real magic of this rule, well, it comes from really understanding what belongs in each of those categories. So let's break it down. Needs, wants, and savings. What do they actually look like in the real world?
And visually, it really is this simple. Half of your income goes to what you absolutely must have. A smaller slice is for the things that you enjoy. And that final, crucial piece, that's for your future self. So let's dig into that first big slice, the needs.
Okay, so your needs are the non-negotiables. This is your rent or your mortgage, groceries, utilities, the gas to get to work, and your healthcare costs. And listen, this also includes the minimum payments you have to make on any debts. These are the bills you have to pay just to keep your life afloat.
Now this is a fantastic point, because the line between a need and a want is totally personal. Think about it. For someone living downtown, a car might be a total luxury. But for a family in the suburbs where 2 parents have to commute in opposite directions, that second car could absolutely be a necessity.
Next up, with 30% of your income, is the wants category. This is the fun stuff, right? Eating out, vacations, buying that new gadget, your streaming subscriptions. Wants are not frivolous. They're what make life enjoyable. But, and this is the key difference, if you had to, if things got tight, you could cut back on these.
And finally, that brings us to the 20% for savings. This is all about paying your future self first, and it's not just one thing. It's building up that emergency fund for when life happens, it's investing for the long term, and this is so important, it's paying down debt faster by contributing more than the minimum.
All right, let's put some real numbers on this to make it clear. Let's say your household brings in $8,000 a month after taxes. Using this rule, you'd set aside $4,000 for your needs, $2,400 for your wants, and a really solid $1,600 would go straight towards savings. Seeing it broken down like that really clarifies where the money goes.
So the rule is simple, the math is clear, but here's the big question. In the real world, with all its messy expenses and surprises, does it actually work? Let's get into the pros and cons. Okay, so the biggest pro is just how simple it is. It's not intimidating, which is great for reinforcing good habits, like actually prioritizing your savings. And when you see that working, it can really build your financial confidence. On the other hand, for a lot of people, it's just unrealistic. Its structure is pretty rigid, and that's not always great when life throws you a curveball.
And yeah, this is really the core criticism. In an ideal world, 50% for your needs sounds fantastic. But with the way the costs of housing, healthcare, and just getting around have been rising, that 50% threshold can be incredibly hard for a lot of families to stay under.
And this chart shows that gap perfectly. For the typical American household in 2023, the 50% rule would mean capping their needs spending at about $3,667 a month. But in reality, the average household was spending over $4,200 a month on just the basics. That's a huge shortfall right out of the gate.
The other problem is that rigidity.
Let's be honest, your expenses are not the same every single month. What happens when your kid needs to go to summer camp or the refrigerator just decides to die one day? A budget that's too strict is a budget that's just going to break under the pressure of real life.
So, after weighing all the good and the bad, how do you figure out if the 50-30-20 rule is the right tool for you? It's definitely not for everyone, but for some people, it can be a fantastic starting point.
Here's a quick way to check. Ask yourself 2 questions. First, are you new to this whole budgeting thing and feeling, well, a little overwhelmed by it all? And second, take a hard, honest look at your numbers. Are your absolute non-negotiable needs already taking up less than half of your take-home pay?
Now, if you found yourself answering yes to those questions, you might just be the ideal person for this. This rule tends to work best for beginners, young workers with stable jobs, and really anyone lucky enough to have lower fixed costs, like cheap rent compared to their income.
But look, if your income is all over the place or your expenses are just more complicated, don't feel like you have to force this to work. There are other methods, like a zero-based budget, where you literally give every single dollar a specific job each month. That might give you the detailed control you're really looking for.
Because, at the end of the day, there is no such thing as a perfect budget that works for everyone all the time. The goal isn't perfection, it's about making progress. So the real question isn't whether the 50-30-20 rule is perfect. It's about figuring out what's the perfect first step for you to take control of your financial future.